Make everyone smile a bit. Fun day. Okay. We believe I'll start in three, two, one. Our path to victory in this debate is to show you that the harms from weed and from drugs are just very, very big and affecting a lot of people in the deepest way. This is the way that we're taking this debate because we are showing you that these people that are harmed so much from this drug are just not worth the happiness of that for a certain time you are getting from weed in that manner. How does weed shows harms a lot of people? Why is it more important than the fun, and why they're not going to get to worse drugs if we don't have the existence of weed comparatively? Okay. Why does weed create a lot of damage? It creates it by doing it in two ways. One, that weed is very addictive. They have substances that just make you want to feel this feeling more. Make this feeling make you feel the way of like relaxation and that your life is okay, and to make you apathic about your problems. It's something that a lot of people want to feel. So when they feel it, it just makes them want it more and more and more. Secondly, because it makes people want to try more things that would make their life better for a certain time. It makes the worst to a worse situation because you just don't have the same feeling after a lot of time that you're using the drug. If you're using it a lot of time for fun, the fun that you're feeling from each time is just getting way lower because of diminishing return, because you don't have the comparison to your day-to-day life that you're suffering and things like that. And the way that you felt it's just like you felt before, but in a lower way, because it's not something that is surprising. It's not something that you haven't felt before. It's just something that you don't feel as because you feel it all the time, and it's like something that you're used to. That's why you will go to get to be curious, to try to find something that would make you feel at the best point of your life when you felt this way, in this manner, by this drug. Why? What are the harms of this? We believe this is trivial. What are the harms? One, health harm. We believe these things of like getting cancer from burning of weed in your lungs and things like that. It just makes you very sick for things. It's a financial crisis when you put much money for these things, so much for producing these things, so much for the factories that produce all of the things surrounding the drug. Thirdly, stagnation of your day-to-day life as someone that takes drugs. It harms your ability to communicate with people, your day-to-day connections with other people, your day-to-day function in work, to be sharp on what you're supposed to do, and to not be apathic to your situation of the world and the problem you have to face as a human being. All of this is happening to a large extent because it's a feedback loop that affects the other things. It's health that affects like the harms financially. All of this also happens if you're not very addictive for all your life. It's just for some periods, for long periods of time, like a lot of years, when the fun is like creating you and make you like 5 years addicted to these things. It means that you're not working. It means that it will affect you later. It means that even if the addiction to drugs is temporarily, it harms your ability to make money for your family. It harms your ability when you're young and you don't have a stable stability base of building your life. Why is it more important than happiness and things like that? One, because the happiness you're gaining from weed is just diminishing every time you have it, because you're used to it, because it's not something, it's you compare it to the other occasions in your life, and it's just not a big thing. Secondly, because health is way more important to us as people from happiness, because we prioritize it more, because the healthcare of people surrounding us are just more important to us. We value the dad that doesn't the life of the kids, that the dad is dependent on it, that depend on the dad, even if it's not fun for him and things like that. Health is just something that we prioritize a lot more. I'll get to why they don't take worse drugs in a second. I'll take a CO. CO.
What is unique about weed exactly as opposed to opioids or alcohol?
Okay. Okay, we believe this is just something that is different from the rest of the drugs because it's very accessible, it's very cheap to produce and things like that. But we believe there's something different from it, from alcohol, about weed. We believe yeah, it is. Because there's difference in the happiness and the high that when you have when you take them. Because alcohol gives you security for a temporary time and feel of freedom for things, but you are not functioning in the same way as you are when you don't have alcohol. You're not able to function and work on heavy things when you do that. It means that when you're taking alcohol, it's not something that you can take for a very long periods of time and work and be a human being like an average human being for a long time. People who get addicted to alcohol are just stagnate in the same situation in a worst way that you cannot that is just not functioning for you as a human. But it is when you're taking weed. Weed is just for a longer periods of time makes you have a good feeling, makes you feel like you're taking much more feelings from food, from relaxation. It makes you feel when you're addicted to weed that you can function in the middle of it when you're high because you're just acting a little bit weird and less sharp, but you're still acting and it's not very visible. You don't have the smell and things like that. You may have a little bit in your eyes, but you're able to function a little bit, but it harms you still by the health, by financial, because it's not something that you're able to do that very well. It harms like your ability to drive a car and things like that. We believe that people won't go to worse drugs in the comparative. We believe that from this social taboo that we have on weed for being illegal and that alcohol is illegal, that even if people would go more to alcohol because it's accepted for traditionally, it's something worse when you're not obeying the law while taking weed, because weed is still illegal today in the status quo. This is something that we're not supposed to do to protect. If people are not obeying the law and take substances that are against the law, then they will go and try other things that are against the law either. We believe that that there's a bigger jump from the social taboo about trying different things that we don't have it in weed, and it gives different high than the highs that you're getting from the different drugs anyways. Impacts for these things: we believe that we have less damage to people taking the drugs, to get to harder drugs and to not ruin people's life by this drug. It's more important than the rest of the things, that the happiness that people get, than the art. For all these reasons, glad to
I think I won't ask if I'm audible. I think that's enough. Just a minute. Okay. Let me start in. Oh, by the way, I'll take POI by writing, please. In around 5 minutes, I'll take it from 5 minutes onwards, please. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'm starting in 3, 2, 1. Let me start by a quick rebuttal, external rebuttal to what we got from OG. First of all, we get from OG that weed is addictive. While this is psychologically true to some extent, it's definitely not physically addictive. It's well known in research and science, unlike other drugs. So that's like the one thing. So even if someone gets addicted, it's much to lower extent and in lower volumes than other drugs. Okay, even more so, we got some more impact regarding it causes cancer, or costs money, less ability to communicate. First of all, regarding the money, as you said, it's cheaper and more accessible than other drugs, so that's why it will cost less money to those who want to consume drugs. Second of all, regarding cancer, smoking cigarettes and drinking alcohol, being exposed to pollution and being in a stressful environment causes a lot more cancer, which means the impact is very, very small. And less ability to communicate. By your own concession, it's not that big a difference as opposed to alcohol. So it's very small impact. So it only happens when you take it, and when you don't take it, it doesn't have effect. Secondly, people have a job, they have a responsibility. If they have a job, they won't take it because they're not as physically addictive, they're psychological. Even if they're psychologically addictive, they know not to take it. And most people are just not as addicted. And I'll go this into my main case. Now, look, what I'm going to show you in my main case is like on both sides of the house, we're going to have some drug use, all right? And first of all, it's not necessarily bad, but mostly we have a unique contribution that is special to weed, which is, just a second, which helps people who have cancer, glaucoma, PTSD, who have mental trouble, and it's unique. It's something you cannot copy without the very bad backlashes of different drugs. That's our case, and by this we prove. As we prove like symmetry between both sides of the house of using drugs, we're going to get that. Now let me explain to you what actually happens. We claim that on both sides there's going to be proper use of mind-altering things. First of all, you have cigarettes, you have alcohol, you have hash on both sides of the house, you have gas masganim, I don't know how you say it. Look, drug use comes from a mental and societal need to change your mind and perception and to get away from stuff. It's a thing that exists throughout history. Even when there was alcohol prohibition, through all cultures, you have historical proof and evidence. People will use it even if it's illegal, even if it's hard to get. People get to use it even if it could cost their lives. It happened in Muslim countries, in hard dictatorships. So it's proven it's a mental need for human beings, right? They need it. So they will get it on both sides of the house, and this doesn't change if you have weed in the world or not, okay? People get drugs in many, many ways. It's a legitimate and important need. Like, okay, so if you don't have weed, you have alcohol, you have other stuff. Now let me make it clear. Most users, especially weed, they don't get addicted. You see it in alcohol as well. Most people are not addicted. They're not incapable of affecting, right? And look, weed is not physically addictive, as I explained to you. Now let me talk more about what causes people to deteriorate to harder drugs as a getaway drug, and what causes it. First thing is mental illness and mental problems that are not treated properly. When people cannot handle the world, that's when they go to deeper drugs. Second of all, it's physiological need. When you're physically addicted, that will cause you to stay and keep being addicted and having more and more. The mechanism we got from OG is related to physical addictivity. So, as I explained to you, these two mechanisms are staying on both sides of the house, but now you don't have a getaway drug, a minor drug that gets better. Now let me talk about the positive impact. It's a unique contribution to cancer patients, people who have glaucoma, PTSD, endometriosis, every disease that has severe pain with it, right? It's a unique thing. There's no substitute to it. There's also have glaucoma. You have nothing else you can use. These people are they're in great pain. The psychological torment they get from it is much worse than what could have happened to them physically in many, many cases. Even more so, the only kind of replacement you have is opioids, right? People will take painkillers like crazy. I don't know if you know this, but painkiller kills way more people in the Western world than they kill since weed, and their physical damages are far greater. What you're giving us is much worse. You're pushing people without weed to drugs that are not even considered drugs. They're legal, right? They are drugs. They are much more addictive, much more dangerous, and even more expensive. Second of all, I want to talk to you about relief, mental relief. As we all agree, health is the most important. People who have severe anxiety, especially poor people in third worlds, they cannot buy fancy opioids or go to psychological therapy. All they have is chewing their weed or something similar, right? Or gut or other substance you already have, right? These things, by the way, exist on both sides of the house. So people who get the emotional relief from it is much stronger. It allows to have a normal life for millions of people, all right? And now that's regarding this. Let me talk more about the effects. So what I'm giving you for now is that we have on both sides of the house the need for drugs, the ability to get different kind of drugs. But on our sides of the house, you have a drug that is not physiologically addictive, only psychologically to some extent, that is far lesser than cigarettes, alcohol, gut, other things people chew in different countries. And if you didn't have weed, you know, these bad drugs that make people, let's say in Papua New Guinea, have no teeth and lose their house, would come to the Western world on this side of the house. It's a thing that will happen. Even more so, listen, if you think about, we got a rebuttal that, like, in your world, said people who have alcohol will have more alcohol on your side of the house, OG. Listen, this causes much worse health damages. Also, it's most socially acceptable, as you said. This will cause people to have less personal responsibility to stop, as it is considered acceptable. So people will get more addicted and will have more addiction and more physical damage that is much far greater. Even when we talk about brain damage, there's a small brain damage that comes with weed, but it's far worse in cigarettes, in alcohol, in different things. So all this we get negative. Yeah, well, I'll take closing. If they don't have, I'll take opening. Closing, you want to go? If not, I'll take opening. Go, opening.
Gambling also is only psychologically addicting. You need to explain to me why is it not addicting to the point that people will transfer to worse drugs.
I'm not sure I get it. First of all, in that sense, weed is unique in the sense that it's not physiologically clean, while alcohol is, and gut is, and different things are addictive. And second of all, as I explained to you, the way to solve these inherent problems of mental illness and like substance abuse is to have some other drug that allows you to get out of that poverty. So weed actually, I'll flip you on your case. It helps people to avoid these drugs. Most weed users don't go into hard drugs. They actually avoid it because their mental problems can get better. Because veterans who have PTSD don't have to get into severe drugs or that physically harms them. So they have better health quality, their ability to work is better, the ability to cooperate socially is better. And more than that, just one more thing is that it allows to evolve a unique culture that allows social inclusion and political movement like liberalism from Woodstock, but my whip will talk about this further. Thank you very much.
Here.
Haifa, A. Haifa, A. Haifa, A.
Haifa.
I will start in 3, 2, 1. Panel, we agree with OG that the more harm, the more we can prove to you that it is addicting, the more we can prove to you that it is something that gives people that makes people go into harder drugs. We win this debate. First of all, let's take a couple of rebuttals to OO. First of all, they tell us that it's psychologically addicting and not physically addicting. I don't know why this matters, because in addiction in general, I want to avoid my problems. I want, by their own analysis, I want to get away from life. So if it is gambling, or if it is or if it is weed, or if it is alcohol, I don't care. The main drive is the same. What davidi told you, that over time this gets less potent and you seek harder stuff, is still standing, and we think this has not been answered by all. Secondly, they tell us it's Shibber, and this counters their own assumptions that weed isn't a delta. We think, yes, it's cheaper. This is why it's more accessible. And it is a delta in this debate. Okay, we think that weed is different. What I will do is in this debate, I will answer, and then I will answer the medical case, and then I will weigh the video. So first of all, why is the medical case not important? They talk about two populations. The first one is people who have diseases that are fatal, diseases that inhibit their life entirely. We think that in these cases, it's fine to give opioids. We think that in these cases, there are suitable alternatives, and it's fine because these people don't experience life fully, and we think it's like, let's talk about trauma. We think that in cases of trauma, weed not only doesn't help, but does active harm. Why is that? We think that right now, when weed exists, when there is something that is an easy alternative, effective alternative that is in the short term to therapy, we think that it is used instead of therapy. Why is that? We think that the moment a veteran comes back from a war, it is very hard to accept that he has gone something that is life-altering, that he's been through a very big problem, and he now needs to recover his mentality. It is way easier to give him weed, to let him disconnect from life, and to let him still experience these things in the moment between consumption. We think this doesn't only help them because they still have to be dependent on weed. We think this helps them because now society is way less likely to give them actual support that they need right now. We think that it is looked upon as an alternative because it is so cheap and easy to use, and because, like OO analyzed you, people think that it's only psychological, it's not really addictive. Come on. Okay, so now let's talk about now let me paint you a picture. How does it actually look to be an addict? We think that like most people who use alcohol recreationally are not really a big impact. Most people who use weed recreationally are not really a big impact, because davidi analyzed it that it's at least the same harm by them spending money, by them being dependent on it. We think it's pretty minor in this debate. What is actually the impact? We think the impact is twofold. First of all, upon the people that are not going on to other drugs, but davidi analyzed you are still being hurt and by in their lives by this. And secondly, people moving on towards drugs. We think that if, like OO analyzed to you, people want to get out of a bad situation in their life. People want to do this. People use drugs for this purpose. We think that weed won't always suffice. We think that because over the course of history, the absolute most of the time, and also still today in most places, weed is illegal. It is a much easier jump for other illegal stuff. If you already have to buy weed from a shady guy on the street, you might as well go to the street next to him and buy, I don't know, meth. We don't think that this is a straight jump. We think that this is a pretty slow thing. We think that it's very easier because every time you go to buy weed, you need to reconsider this. You need to think about it. It's tiny step to harder and harder materials that hurt you over the long run. We think that this is explicit way because even if they say weed is legal now, it's accepted now, we think that over most of history it wasn't. So even the case of medical use is mitigated by the fact that over most of history there wasn't this, so we regret its existence. Okay, we think let's weigh a bit more. We think that even if oppositions will try and tell us that we have some sort of enjoyment, we think that one, we have shown you that there is a viable alternative that is better, but lacks all the analysis we gave that most people will go to. But we think that they won't go to actual hard drugs because first of all, consuming something that isn't like alcohol, isn't a drink. Yeah, sure. Bye, Jenny.
The best case of OG in this debate is a world without drugs. Could you imagine such a world?
No, we don't think there's a world without drugs. We think that in the comparison, like you're being uncomparative. We think that in the comparison, we get less people who are highly addicted to drugs. We think this addiction ruins their lives. We think that this is a very high impact on our side, and this is why our world is preferable. Okay, so we think that like davidi analyzed, weed has a bunch of mechanisms that already draw you towards drug. It's something you actively have to consume and work towards. It's not like drinking something that looks fun. It's a juice. It's like something you do every day consistently. It's something that is outside the norm of what you do. We think that davidi has already told you that even if oppositions prove to you that most people are not addicted, our burden to prove is about those that are most affected because they are affected not proportionally to the amount they use because it's exponential. We think that even if we don't need to tell you that they'll be addicted their whole life because there is an impact over a short time because of this OG. Woo!
Okay. I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. Okay, finally, the main speech, the main thing that I'm going to do is to rebuild on what my partner said, and then, very importantly, to weigh our impacts against other potential impacts and against OO's main impact. But first of all, some external rebuttals to OO. Let's talk about addiction to weed. First of all, psychological addiction is not that bad because it can be easily solved, okay? Because the issue with physical addiction and why is it so bad is that you feel physical pain from restraining from using the drug. You feel crazy, you feel very sick from stop of using the drug. So it can't be really engaged. But if you, on the other hand, if you are psychologically addicted to something, you can use a psychotherapist that can guide you in this process because you don't feel like you have to do it. You don't feel actual pain, and therefore it's a much lighter addiction. Second, you can get addicted psychologically to anything that makes you happy, okay? That's how addiction works. The main burden of OO is to prove us that this thing that is quote unquote addictive makes a severe harm. It's really harmful. I don't think we were able to prove that. I recall some like damage to the brain. Okay, not like very severe damage. They didn't really explain the impact of it. And second, they talked about like causing cancers. I think it's quite rubbish. Okay, cigarettes are the main reason for causing cancer. Weed is not the main reason, but even if we take their claim, the question is not whether weed is addictive or not, the question is whether it is better than the comparative. And the comparative they have in their world is, for example, alcohol, which is much more addictive, one of the most addictive drugs that we have, which is much more addictive than weed, which is much more dangerous and have a potential danger of overdose. The much more potential danger of overdose. So therefore, they're not really able to prove that the addiction to weed is so bad and is so important. Now, the second thing is regarding gateway drugs. I'll just say, look, you must prove that this is the important gateway drug, and if we replace it with something else, with another drug, we have a huge impact, and we change the way that this process works. And I don't really see it. I don't understand why alcohol can't be a gateway drug, and the other things were already told by my partner. Now, okay, let's move on. First of all, I want to expand on chronic illnesses, because you talked about these diseases are only terminal diseases, so they don't really help. Look, this is very wrong. We have many medical conditions that affect people's life, affect healthy people, people who can live for many years, even if we are not terminally. We have many severe pains, back pains, for example, that are very, really bad, are usually treated with this drug. We have Parkinson, like you can have Parkinson for many years and function with that, but you find it very hard to function without weed, which helps you calm down and helps you release decrease the effect. And regarding PTSD, so basically we show you a large amount of people that they're suffering that can function and they cannot longer suffer because we have this weed. Now regarding PTSD, the problem with people with PTSD is that they just can't function. Okay, PTSD is not so easy to solve. You can't just solve it with psychotherapy, and even if you can, it takes a lot of time. And in the meantime, you have to be able to give the opportunity of these people to function, basically. So these people need those drugs to function. They need those drugs in order not to feel constantly stressed. And if they are not given those drugs, they're going to go for other drugs, for alcohol and other drugs. And we already told you why those drugs are actually much worse. Now let's move on to main points that I want to make. We give you the most important impact in this debate, which is end of suffering. And I'm going to explain to you, first of all, it is more important than happiness. Let's understand why it's more important than happiness. First of all, specificity. You can get happiness from many things. You can get happiness from many things in your life. You can do many things. You can go running if you want to be happier. This is not the thing. Weed is not the specific way and the only way that we have to increase our happiness. But weed, in those cases that you talked about, is basically the only safe way to increase, the only safe way to save us from immense suffering. The second thing is the extent. Less happy people can still function. Less happy people can still live their life and lead a good life. Actually, if they have a real condition, they can take care of it. However, if we talk about people with chronic illnesses that suffer from pain, they just can't function. This is a huge impact on their life. This is a huge impact on the way they lead their life. Now, regarding health, because OG talked about it. Look, again, I'm not going to weigh directly. I'm just going to say, the health, okay, many things damage health, okay? Many things cause the damage of health. Now, we explained to you why actually the reason that there is an incentive for people to consume drugs, people want this feeling, or at least some people want this feeling of euphoria, want this feeling of escapism and getting out of their normal life. So basically, they're going to need that anyway. So health damage will be given. Health damage will be caused to people anyway, whether we have weed or not. I want from CGRPOI, please.
Most people were harmed by the criminalization of weed more than any addiction that you can find.
The criminalization of weed, okay. This is because it is our world, okay? This is because we took a specific role in our world. It's not clear to me why in a hypothetical world, you would have just other stuff. Okay, you would just have other stuff that becomes like the criminalized, you know. Okay, and yeah. Okay, now let's talk about social effects, because I fear that the second house might talk about social effects. So shortly, we show, it's very, like, if they're going to talk about cultural effects, if they're going to talk about effects on culture, we basically, this is very complicated. This is very complicated to understand how society behaves, how culture behaves. We give you a very direct and specific way that we help people. And we actually fix people's life. This is why end of suffering is the most important impact in this debate. Sorry. Okay. Now, regarding the gateway drug, I wanted also to say that O actually has a contradiction in what we say. Because they say this drug is, sorry, but they said that weed is not similar at all. Weed is a completely different experience than heavy drugs. But then they say people are going to go for heavy drugs because it's like, because it's just an extension, an intensified version of weed. So I don't really get their point here. So for this reason, please oppose.
I wanted to run an extension on the fact that people who take weed become incredibly annoying, but Oz told me no, 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 no. So instead, we're talking about Nixon and criminalization laws. I'll take a POI at minute 420 from OO. Okay, let's start with the actual case. I want you to, what does OO respond to our exposition? They tell us, well, other things would replace weed, and therefore you have no case. Well, OO, I'm about to analyze why weed is unique. Note that OO is right, though. Against OGs that just tells them, oh, it's slightly cheaper, it's slightly more accessible. They don't. They do win versus OG. But if I analyze why weed is much more common and much easier to consume, not only do I defeat OO, but I also defeat OG by unlocking their impacts versus other teams in the room. Let's start. What do we know about weed? Sure, OG tell you weed doesn't kill you. But it is important to understand what this means because once a person smokes something, he's already into the drug. Whether it kills him or doesn't kill him is not that important. What's important is the perception around weed, right? Because weed doesn't make people have rotten teeth. It doesn't make people's eyes explode. It doesn't make people look disgusting. People who take weed are largely still functional. So when someone who comes and tells me, oh, please try this cool plant, I tell him, sure, because he looks like a functioning human being. Meanwhile, when a meth addict wants me to share a needle, he looks like a fucking schizophrenic, and I tell him to fuck off. This is incredibly important because the main vector of spread is through sociality, and the presentability of the drug is the most vital mechanism. But I think, second of all, culturally, weed is much easier to spread, right? We had the whole hippie thing where they liked plants. Weed is a plant. Weed is easy to make from the plant. It goes through no synthetic thingy. And second of all, it's a very easy party drug, right? Because I can share weed, I can't really share meth, definitely can't share heroin, no sharing needles, and therefore it's a very fun party drug that has spread culturally through that. Second of all, it's just a plant. Third of all, it's just a plant somehow, right? It's easy to tell someone, oh, look at this plant. Look at how nice it is. It's natural. It doesn't go through processing. It's not actually dangerous. It's all propaganda, which it is. And that's important here because unlike other drugs, all of that is false about weed. Weed is great. Weed is amazing for us, but we still win. Fourthly, I think weed is very easy to control on the effects that you have. It's very easy to ease someone into weed. To tell them, oh, just take a puff once, take a puff there. Oh, take 3 puffs. Do you feel bad? Let's stop. Do you feel good? Let's continue. It's very easy to control the experience that you get with weed. This means that, first of all, just easier to convince people to get on weed, but second of all, that people who consume weed have an easier time controlling it in their life, which means it's less of a hindrance, which means that their consumption of weed rises. This is comparatively to other drugs like being meth, being even LSD, which you have literally zero control over, very synthetic. You have literal ego death in LSD, and you hear all of those scary stories about LSD. Meanwhile, in weed, there's no real scary stories, and it's all fucking bullshit. Okay, this already wins over OG because we unlocked their impact. But here to the criminalization case. I think that despite the fact that weed is not actually harmful, I think that weed is still heavily criminalized and heavily persecuted. Note that the people who make the laws are not the people who smoke weed, right? Nixon didn't sit in his Iowa office blowing a blunt and said, let's criminalize this shit. The people who criminalize weed, who criminalize drugs, have no idea what's going on in the street. They don't really care. They see drug, they see mind-altering substance, we gotta ban it. But second of all, it's just low-hanging fruit. The fact that many people consume it means that I can appear very easily tough on crime by not actually persecuting real criminals, but by persecuting normal people. It's 420, so please, oh.
Yes, note that betel nut, alcohol, and hash are all cheap, easy to spread, fun, and not mind-altering. Why is
As
weed
far as I
kind
know,
of
hash
what
is
you said?
weed. Like hash is weed. I'm not wrong, right? Hash is basically weed for us. But second of all, I think hash is not as popular compared to weed. So factually, no. I think that alcohol is legal and therefore no. Yes, when alcohol was illegal in prohibition, we think all of our impacts are unlocked. We think prohibition was an awful thing. This means that a lot of people get locked up. People lose their rights because they smoked a fucking plant, because their friend convinced them to try this out and they realized it helps their life, it helps their function, it makes them feel good, and now they end up in jail. Children end up without fathers. People end with stigma for the rest of their life about the fact that they're a drug addict. This is Oswald will continue on this, but this is where actual exposition and actual gateway drugs are unlocked at the point which I am ostracized from normal society. But second of all, I think weed contributes greatly to crime. Note that the fact that weed is easy to produce doesn't require much knowledge compared to other synthetic drugs and can be produced at a high volume means that it's very attractive for crime syndicates. But second of all, the fact that weed is popular, and it's popular in all of society, being that it's a very simple thing because of my explanation, means that it's widespread everywhere. This is important because it means few things. It means that crime organizations can scale up very easily because everywhere there are addicts, everywhere there are people that are willing to take weed. But second of all, that more than one gang can form in the same city because there are enough customers. This is awful because when two gangs are able to form because there's enough profit, this is where they start to fight over each other of territory and you get gang shootings and such. I think that second of all, the crimes that weed brings with it is extremely bad. I think that on the simplest way, it harms my safety, right? I can't send my kid in the neighborhood when I know that there's a bunch of criminals down the road that are smoking the devil's plant and partying and doing bad shit, which means that my own autonomy is greatly hard. But I also see people with guns walking outside because they're in crime syndicates, and I don't want to go outside when people are with guns. But I also think that it bankrolls other activities, right? Because people bring prostitution with them, they bring other drugs and things like that. And even if weed is not a gateway drug, you can sell it to criminals at the very least. So it means that accessibility to this drug increases. But third of all, I think people who are already on this side of the law, already violating the law to such high degree, are more likely to do robbings, are more likely to murder, are much more likely to violate the law in many ways, which proves very acute impact. Thank you very much.
Right now. Okay, so we are going to explain to you why in many periods of history, people couldn't get any drug but weed because of a quick analysis I will make about the way it is accessible that even the most primitive person without any tools can use it. This also means it's much easier for poor people nowadays to use weed. But our main case, the battle of our extension is going to be not that it will make people use like worse drugs or something like that, which most groups try to lean on. We will explain to you why weed is good by itself, why every society need a kind of vice and need a kind of relaxing material, and why even a slight addiction is better than what we will have in society without this kind of drug. In a society without any drug, yeah? Not without opioids, without alcohol, without nothing. Why? Okay, beginning my analysis, why in many parts of history we didn't have anything? Because Weed requires practically zero processing. You can chew a bunch of weed leaves and it will have an effect on you. And you can burn a bunch of weed leaves and inhale the ashes and it will have an effect on you. This is nothing. No other drug has this little an amount you need to use it to have the effect. You don't need to extract any material. You don't need to mash it. You don't need an entire winery or however it is they make beer. You don't need any of that stuff. You just need to be able to make fire or to be able to eat leaves. It's nothing. And we think that this is a good thing for many kinds of society, many parts of society. We think, and to many periods of history, because something you have to process means that it is very expensive and that you can't access it. And in most people who have lived across history didn't have the time and the energy to smash. They didn't even discovered that they can smash opiates and then use them, or to smash tobacco and then smoke it. And so what they had was weed. But if they didn't have weed, and this is me going to my guess, they will have many problems. Why? Because weed, it just reduces the level of aggressiveness in the society. If many people do weed from time to time, then that means they are less likely to get into fights. This means the society in itself will be less aggressive in like the most amorphic ways possible. In every single part of the society and every single part of the culture, we're talking about thousands of years of this kinds of stuff developed, they will be less aggressive. They will be less likely to start wars. They will be less likely to kill each other, and they will be much more better at making peace. But also, we think that any society needs like a kind of drug that is a relaxing material for uses of medicine, because it is critical for any kind of wound treatment that you can relax the person you're helping. For example, if my tribesmate has gotten into a fight with a bear and his arm and after the bear bit him, and now after a few days it is blowing up and there's some sort of an infection, then I might need to take his arm off. Or maybe if someone is very sick, then I am going to do all kinds of treatment that is very painful on him. And if he doesn't relax and chills down, I can't make any kind of medicine on the person. All serious medicine, besides like drink every thing that a doctor can do, besides telling you to drink tea and fight it off, requires you to be relaxed. And many times people and that means you have to have ways to relax the person by force. And the easiest way to do that is to let him chew a bunch of weeds. And if in many parts of history that no other team in this debate talked about, if you didn't have any kind of material, the person is likely to, I don't know, to start moving or shaking, and then you lose him, and then he dies, and then you can't help a wounded person, and you can't treat a wounded person, and you can't do anything about him. We also think that like many people with that are neurodivergent, then we'd help them across history in their childhood, because when you're hyperactive or having troubles communicating and everything is stressing you out in a way that is not proportional to the environment, people can give you weed and relax you. And we also think that this just makes a lot of people much happier, because of course we'd have some damage on your like functioning as a person, but many people are not functioning and are not helpful in any way anyways, like people who were born, people who are maimed, or people who are old, or people who are were born with some sort of mental disorder or cognitive disorder. And when they can't help society, there is no reason not to give them weed. Okay, weed will just make them happier and do nothing else. And again, there is no alternative. We explained to you just this. Now, we think that on their side, people fight more. People are more aggressive. People have a lot of bottled up tensions, and the ways they have to do it, like what we call gambling and fighting and boxing and stuff like that, that is harmful things. That are things that damages you. Okay, we think that is not the world we wanted to live in. And we have a few rebuttals and weighings. First of all, we think that more critical than the analysis of OO about why people will use slightly heavier drugs, our analysis is more critical, because the difference between some drugs to no drugs, as like I just explained, is very big because of all the kinds of stuff that only drugs can do to it, to an ancient society. But also we think that the difference between a light drug to very slightly heavier drugs is very little. Also, before going to a rebuttal, I take OG.
Before modern times, weed was only found in and around the Caribbean. This was in the least populated areas of the world. I don't know how it was affecting the most people.
What? No, weed was accessible in many parts. Weed was accessible in the like China and Japan. Weed was accessible in the Middle East. You know that the word assassin comes from like Arab riders that used weed. Weed was accessible in many parts of the world. Yes, it wasn't accessible in Europe, but Europe was an unpopulated and undeveloped part for most of history. For most of regions has had weed for most of their history. Now we think that, and again, we're talking about modern times too, because poor people can't have any kind of weed. We also think that the fact that weed is so accessible and so easy to produce mitigates the effects that OG has on addiction. Because the only things that addictions are bad for is one, you're getting if you run out of the thing, then you need to withdraw, and withdrawing is not fun, and you get like diminishing returns, and you all the time need more and more. But because you have so much, it will take you a lot of time until you reach the amount, until you like finish your stock, and you can just compensate for the diminishing return with more and more weed forever. And weed being accessible means it's much better to be addicted to it than to end to something that is not accessible. And for oppose. Yeah.
Am I clearly audible?
Yes, yes, you are.
Yes, I am. Fantastic. Okay, just a couple of seconds. Okay. Okay. Now, okay. Going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Great. I want to start off by giving a bit of historical context here, right? Weed is something that was heavily criminalized in the past. When we say the war on drugs, we're talking about how in the 70s, the Reagan administration used extensive brutality and persecution to any users of weed because he wanted to target hippies, which smoked a lot and were Democratic voters. We're talking about throughout history how it was seen as a drug and how drugs are, as we know today, are something that is heavily criminalized. The whole legalization is something that happened in the past decade. We're talking about the last 100, if not more so, years. Our case basically says that the whole of history, it was forbidden. People suffered hugely from the criminalization, and any medical discoveries that were made, and in reference to OO's case, are very, very recent, right? So that minimizes their extent largely. Great. Now, the actual impacts. First of all, Rwad talks to you about how it funds crime syndicates and organization. That means more weapons, more crimes, more collateral damage, and more death overall. But crucially, we're also talking about the people and the victims of decriminalization, right? We're talking about people who are thrown in jail for years, people who haven't harmed anyone, right? There isn't any outside damage that I cause the environment when I smoke weed, and yet I'm still thrown into prison. There is social stigma after I get discharged. There is in prison, those people can crucially and very easily, like Rwad said, get into drugs. How? Because they're in a state of despair. Because there are real, actual drug dealers in prison, right? Like hardcore drugs. So it's very accessible to me. I'm already considered a drug addict, right? The whole social taboo was broken. There is no further stigma. It's much less deterring to do it. What this does is essentially unlock OG's case for you, right? Now it's a gateway drug. Now it's something that is very easy to achieve because now I'm in the entire environment that allows me to achieve it. So that is how we do the leap to hardcore drugs. And also, it's very bad because those people are currently extremely vulnerable because they were fucked over by the criminalization, because they're now in prison, because they're sad. Also, another way over OG, when I'm in prison, I'm even less productive. I'm not only am I not working as hard, I'm actively costing money to the economy, right? I'm now actively costing money. Now cops try to arrest me instead of actual criminals who damage society, right? So I'm very bad productively, and It's not that I'm less food on the table for my kids. No, daddy isn't fucking home because he's in prison for 5 years. That's very, very bad, right? Also, all of our impacts are increased hugely when Rwad and CO agree that it is very accessible. It is something that is very, very popular. Great. So, essentially, now I'm going to interact with the cases that we heard in the house. First of all, essentially, there was a huge clash about whether or not weed is good, weed is bad. OO say, look, weed helps cancer treatments. The opioids and painkillers are very addictive, and it provides relief. Look, first of all, weed isn't a magical cure, right? It doesn't cure cancer. It brings you some relief. We think that much like oppositions want to like to say in this debate, there are alternatives. I can have painkillers, which are also legal. They are also so legal, so no criminalization effects here. They might be addictive, much like how weed is addictive, but crucially, they're administered at hospitals. I need to have a prescription in order to use them. There are no painkiller drug dealers. There are though weed drug dealers. I can get weed without hospitals. It's very, very difficult to get painkillers without hospitals. So they can administer it to me responsibly. And also, crucially, I don't care about addiction when I'm talking about cancer patients, about terminal ill people, right? They're going to die soon anyways. I don't actually care that much. Great, yeah, I'll take you. Oh.
Unclear why in your world there wouldn't have been another light drug that would have been criminalized, and also the prosecution in the US is from the 50s till now, 70 years, compared to centuries of medical use for those who need it most.
Okay, I don't think there was centuries of medical use. And also, I think that Rwad explains to you very clearly why weed is very easy to confuse as something that is hardcore drugs, right? It's something that is seen as a mind altering and all those stuff, but crucially, it isn't that addictive. It was perceived as a hardcore drug and was criminalized that way. When we remove weed from that equation, there isn't a magical new drug that is perceived that way. No, weed is unique in that manner. Rwad analyzed that very well. Okay, also about CO's case, weed makes you relax very much. Look, I can get relaxed by sedatives. I can have coping mechanisms that I can develop. Those are, and also, even if I don't do that, those are very, very minor impacts, right? I'm going to save I can still treat someone's wood when he's stressed. Yes, he's going to shake a bit, so I learn how to do it when he's shaking. And also, they crucially concede that weed is something that was very, very popular. All right, great. Now to the last major point in the debate. Essentially, opposition say, look, it's better than the alternatives. Cigarettes, alcohol, and all of that. All of those examples are things that are very legal, yeah? Cigarettes are legal, alcohol is legal. If anyone is going to say prohibition, I swear to God, it was 4 years, only 4 years throughout the entire history, and caused extreme backlash. It's not in the debate. All of those people, some people might be harmed by alcohols or cigarette addiction, but crucially, where are they harmed more? By those impacts or by criminalization? Criminalization harms them much more. Why? Because for smoking and alcohol addicts, they can have outside help. They have rehabilitation. They have anonymous alcoholics, right? They have sympathy because they are seen as victims. They can recover from it. They have a helping hand. Crucially, on our side, no one wants to help a criminal. No one wants to help someone who's been to prison. There's a stigma on it. It is much, much worse. And also the impact themselves, being to prison, being criminalized is fucking bad. For all those reasons, we beg you to.
Thank you very much to the government whip and to somebody's opposition side and this debate as a whole. I'd like to call the opposition whip. Woohoo!
I will begin in 3, 2, 1. Okay. Look, we are talking about a regrets motion, about a phenomenon which has existed for millennia. What governments want to talk about is at best 1 century. one century in which there was maybe increased impacts. I will get to you. Oh, that's a lie. What they want to talk to us about is in a century of impact, and that's just, for in my opinion, not very sensible. Not only because one century, even if more people existed in that century, more people smoked weed maybe in that century, I concede that, but but in that century, they have more alternatives. That is, no team in this debate actually explained what the difference is between weed and like the second most addictive drug. Maybe some level exists to it, but look, in the Inca societies, they used to make LSD or mind-altering drugs out of cocoa beans, to the extent that in an alternative world, the cocoa bean drug became as successful as weed did. It is like natural and everything CG care about. To the extent that that became, I'll take you later, to the extent that that became the more successful drug, I have literally no idea why it doesn't function the same way. Why isn't there the same criminalization that Nixon did? Why is it not the exact same? So, in the modern world, where I have access to everything, the differences are minuscule. What we're saying is, in the ancient world, however, for until globalization, until very, very recently, criminalization of weed was not a thing that existed, right? Criminalization of weed in the US started in the early 20th century because a billionaire really hated the Democrats. It's a true story. The criminalization of weed is an incredibly recent phenomenon. Now, this means that the entirety gateway drug is also a complete something that is only existing in a small modern setting. We also think that the whole gateway drug explanation is only existing insofar as there are not other things which are also legal and would make people want to go. Like in brothels, there is access to cocaine. In gambling rings, there are access to harder drugs. Why is the gateway drug a phenomenon that OG care about actually unique to this specific legal, very common vice? What we're saying is actually unique to maybe a small, but small over a very extensive period of time population. Now, 200, they say, oh, we also mentioned history. Okay, I want to read to you exactly what they said on history. They told us there used to be, from the beginning of time, people who smoked weed. Okay, maybe there were also people who did other things. Why exactly is this unique? Itay tells you why it's unique. It's easy to produce. It doesn't require expensive things. And he tells you the impacts to a much larger extent. That it makes surgery much easier. That it reduces violence. That everybody has a certain right to have a relaxation in their life, a vice in their life. Before I continue, OG.
Yeah, the specific settings of use of alcohol is occasionally on social situations for confidence. We have shown you that the specific settings of weed is alone for relaxation, which is just special here and common for day-to-day use.
What you're saying is also true for going to a brothel. It's not a very social phenomenon. What you're saying is also true for gambling. What you're saying is also true for a million other vices. What you're saying is just completely non-unique in this motion. Now, to the extent that it is a gateway drug, we believe that people make this choice, right? There is a level of dependence, and sure, maybe people are more willing to go in there, but that's a choice that they make to actually cross that extra line, even if it's easier for them. We just don't think that you people should be punished over the decisions that people make. Now, this is why we believe that the whole gateway drug is just not a sufficient explanation. We believe that it's also less important. That is, for the amount of people who actually make this transition is not particularly high, especially historically speaking, for reasons already said. However, the amount of people who get into relaxation in cultures in which it was actually a ritual for a community to have access to it is very high. And even if for them the delta is small, it's the difference between a good day and a bad day. And what we're told is, oh, there are other forms of relaxation. Fine, but nothing is chemically altered in my brain when I'm depressed to make me less depressed. Nothing else may give me a pure relaxation, right? Other vices give me excitement to a larger extent. This is specifically something that gives relaxation. It's specifically something that's good for people who have these developmental diseases. We believe, therefore, we are superior to OO because what they say is, oh, people will move to other vices, right? But we just think that to the extent that they do, we do not understand why this is unique from the second highest drug, right? And therefore we just do not understand why they are unique in this motion. Now, we also hear from them that there is a right to be happy, but why is this right to be happy so important, right? If we actually tell you the medical uses this is, we actually explain to you that people who are innocent who are completely unrelated to the use of drugs gain benefits from this, historically speaking. We also talk about a larger population, actually in an analytical way. In CG's case, their whole legalization argument is completely dependent on a specific time frame, and therefore it's not a very strong argument. And the point that they make on why it's natural is also not. Therefore, please oppose.